Well, last week, President Trump declared churches essential and ordered governors to reopen houses of worship across the country. On Monday, California Governor Gavin Newsom followed suit, releasing guidelines for churches to reopen after weeks of being closed due to the coronavirus pandemic. I do want to now bring in the executive director of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, Timothy Head, to talk more about safely reopening churches. Hi, Tim. Thanks so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
How do you feel about the president's declaration to reopen churches across the country amid this pandemic?
We greatly appreciate it for certain. The reality is that that online attendance for the last 3 months has actually seen a significant uptick across the country for churches that segued from in-person to virtual services. But as we all know, there really is no substitute for actually being able to be able to congregate together as brothers and sisters in Christ for Christian churches across the country. So we not only think that this was a constitutionally correct decision, but we also think that this was spiritually and socially critical for America.
Following the president's declaration that churches are essential, the CDC did release guidelines to reopen. Based on those guidelines, how different are things looking for parishioners when they're returning? And what changes have you seen being implemented so far to prevent the spread of COVID-19 as attendees go back to church?
Yeah, good question. So, obviously, this is testing the agility and the creativity of churches, just like other large business conveners. And so, I think what a lot of churches are trying to do is move to more services. So, doubling or tripling services. Instead of having 2 services on a Sunday morning, they actually might have 6. In a given day, and moving their crowds to smaller numbers, and certainly spacing people out. So, we're seeing smart and I think reasonable accommodations being made, still offering virtual services for folks who do have some sort of immune system vulnerabilities. So I think the churches are trying to accommodate people as much as possible, but at the same time, not forsaking the biblical admonition for us to not forsake meeting with each other in person.
One particular issue that's been raised about reopening churches is singing in churches as parishioners do worship, as they do attend service. How have churches been changing that aspect of a service to minimize the possibility that they could be spreading coronavirus within the church?
Sure, good question, and I think that there's an array of accommodations that have been made to that. There are plenty of services that have moved to either no singing or musical element to the service, or maybe again with significant distancing between folks that are in attendance, trying to minimize that. Also, encouraging people to still cover their mouths, to have masks if that's available, and making masks, for that matter, available to people when they come to churches is certainly another accommodation.
All right, Tim Head, the executive director of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, joining us to discuss the reopening of churches amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, Tim.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Greta.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One America News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One America News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.